Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to today's Maximo User Group UK and Ireland virtual meeting. Our topic for today is how to make IBM Maximo Asset Management or IBM Control Desk system seem easier to support. All phone lines are in listen-only mode, and later there will be a question and answer session with instructions being given at that time. You may ask a question at any time using the chat window located in the control panel. Chat questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's session is being recorded, and you will be provided a copy of today's materials following the call. Now, let me introduce our guest speaker. Mark Robbins is a technical design authority for IBM business partner Vitasi, providing in-depth technical support for customers from a number of different industries. An established Maximo developer, Mark also has many years' experience training customers and staff on highly technical aspects of Maximo, including WebSphere and log analysis. Prior to his role at Vitasi, Mark was part of a team of system administrators managing Maximo for a leading utility company. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to you, Mark. Take it away.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about support and how we can make Maximo easier to support. And it's an area that doesn't always get the focus it needs. And if I know from experience, the team supporting Maximo are often supporting other things as well, and sometimes need a bit of extra help, and that's what this is here to do. So as a support lead working on our support cases, I see a lot of cases where a few tips could make a big difference. This webinar is going to focus on using a 7.5 system because a lot of customers are actually still on 7.5 or even earlier. A lot of the things will be applicable though to 7.6. There's lots more things that you could do, which I don't have time to discuss today. If you are interested in learning more about those, then please contact me. So, day-to-day support. I'm not going to cover integration-related tips because I could cover those in the complete presentation of another hour. Again, load balancing and architecture is something possibly for a future presentation. If you're interested in either of those as a presentation, please let us know via the feedback. So the first thing then is a common problem that customers have where support teams are spending a lot of time doing password resets. And this can tie up a disproportionate amount of time and can be quite frustrating if you're the customer, if you're the support team. So you may not realize it, but Maximo will actually provide a facility where your users can reset the passwords themselves just by answering a question and having a password emailed out to them. It does require a little bit of configuration in terms of the email address and a security question. What you can also do is enable login tracking. And you can do that within Maximo, and I'll show you where in a minute. And this allows you to see who's actually using your Maximo system or trying to log in. By default, Maximo won't actually track login attempts, which can be a bit of a concern, particularly if your Maximo instance is on the web. And we've seen cases where we've had some very strange login requests for UK-based systems. In a couple of cases from Peru and Brazil, which there's just no need for that. But we need to let our customers know. And that logging can be enabled via the user's application. And we'll see that in the next. If you're going to enable that, then it's well worth building yourself a BERT report to show common issues, particularly multiple account login attempts from a single IP address. It's quite useful to identify if you're under attack from a particular place. Or particularly to check if the user is repeatedly having problems that they're blocking the account, then the report can highlight that. And you might decide that you want to send them an email or ring them up and offer to change the password, or just help them understand. And so what we're going to do then is going to demo this, and you should now be able to see a Maximo login screen. Lisa, Jennifer, is that visible?
We can see that.
Marvelous, thank you. So I'm logging in as Max Admin and just going down into the security application, then across to users. Going to here, and there's a simple one which is security controls, and you've got various things that are set up here, but the key ones you want to do is to enable login tracking, and this will then ensure that all login attempts, successful or otherwise, are stored in the login tracking table in the back end, which you can then go away and query, and there's a BERT report which you can see, and you may want to customize to do other things. And while you're in here, you can see the automatic password generation section and the template for emailing reset passwords. And this is the communications template that you can use to send out that password I was talking about to the users whenever a new password is sent. I always like to allow generated passwords to be displayed on screen so that the support people don't make a mistake in terms of telling the user one thing when actually they type something subtly different. Yeah, and you've got those there. Once a user's logged in, then you can see the login tracking information if you go to Manage Sessions menu. And here we can see the login tracking, and we can see the different attempts that have been going on. I'll just scroll here. You can see the details here, things like that. And this is a good one if your company permits you to customize these dialog boxes. It's always nice to be able to put the server host IBM in there. That's another minor modification. Move on. So start centers are a really nice and useful thing, and most companies that I work with now are beginning to use them if they haven't already done so. And these are the first bits of Maximo that users see once they log in. And these can have graphs on them, information, inboxes and such like. And they're often used as a way to move away from an application. For example, out of work orders into purchase orders and things like that. One of the important things about them, though, is that a busy start center could actually cause a real problem. Because the start center is the first thing the user sees when they log in, if that start center is slow to load, then the user's perception of Maximo will be that it is a slow system. And no one wants a user to come in and do that. thing that I like to recommend to customers who are implementing start centers is that they create either a blank or basic start center for all users. And that's the one that the user sees when they log in. And then there can be separate start centers with more busy content. And I'll show you an example of this in a minute. While you're there creating start centers, pamper yourself. System administrators. Create an administration center. Give yourself access to key applications at a click of a button. Result sets to show you key information. If you've got queries that you use to find bad data or monitor bad data, consider putting a portlet in there to show you that, so you can see those work orders that have got a particular problem that you may need to act. And I'll just quickly log in and show you how that would look. So from my Max admin, you can see here I've got a welcome start center, very empty, just got a bulletin board on there. And then I've got more start centers here, which are much busier. But these won't get seen on the initial login. The user has to select the tab to actually see them. If you're one of those companies that hasn't adopted start centers yet, then I can quite understand that. But you may well be finding that you're getting hit by a particular irritation. And that is this message here. You do not have any start centers configured. Well, that's okay. Please contact your system administrator. That one's not so useful. If as a company you've decided you don't want start centers, then what you're probably finding is with every third or so new user that comes in, someone reads a message and says, oh, I must ring the help desk. At which point you've got a help desk call that you don't need because you have to explain, actually, we don't use start centers. So the answer to that is to go in and to make a minor change to your DB configuration. The message is in there, because this message here is stored in a message with this group and this key. Now, what I like to do with systems with the administrator's permission is to go in to change it. So it doesn't say do not have any start centers configured. It says, welcome to Maximo. You can find the user guide here. Something like that. A nice friendly welcome message that the person coming in knows where they can get information. And more importantly for you, you never get this message leading to a help desk call that you're not interested in. And I showed you the start center for Max Admin. What I'll do is I'll show you how that looks for a different user. And this is one that was just created for this purpose. And you can see here that this one has just got that very simple one. So it's very easy for someone to come in and very quick. They don't have to have any pauses at all. If you ask, when you're doing a system administration work, there's a fair chance that you're going to be coming across data errors. And that could be data errors caused by users performing particular operations, or in the worst case, bugs within custom code or even the core code. And you can spend quite a lot of your day writing SQL to go and check for those kind of things. One of the things that I've done previously and encourage system administrators to do is to learn to build a few BERT reports so that they can check for common issues and warn you about them. And what you can do is, if you know that you've got a particular problem, then you could write the BERT report and have it scheduled so it emails yourself or your team with those things, perhaps on a weekly basis, so you can go in and sort out the data. If you're working in an environment with really good super users, and I have worked in those kind of environments, then what you can do is you can give them access to a similar report, so that if a user has a problem with a particular purchase order, then that super user is able to run the report on that purchase order, and when they look at that report and the output for that, it can give them clues as to what's gone wrong. Particularly if you're the person building it, you could say, well, this figure doesn't match this, go away and look at this thing here, or ask the user, did they do this action? And you can add text in there with recommended actions, and with a little bit of clever work within but you can make that text conditional, so it only appears when there's definitely a problem. And this report here can save you a lot of time, because super users are then able to act as your eyes and ears, and they may be able to give advice that prevents a case being created in the first place. If you do have a problem, then there are some key things to gather, and these are things that we particularly look for if people are raising cases with us, and similarly if you're raising PMRs or service requests with IBM. Getting the date and time of the event and all these things are steps to reproduce. Screenshots are certainly useful. One of the most useful things is actually getting the exact error text, because a lot of system administrators don't realize that you can actually trace that BMX code right back to the relevant Java code. So you can say, right, okay, this BMX code came from a work order class, and it was the class for field XYZ. And particularly if you're going through logs, then, or if you're going through logs or having to deal with a system where there are lots of errors going on, that kind of ability to trace back is very useful. Get things like the user details, and particularly the user ID. If you've got your logging set correctly, then it is possible to trace a lot of the user's movements through Maximo. And with automated tools like the Veracity Log Analyzer, we can give you a very good idea of where the user's been, and we can then use that to identify the causes of errors, where perhaps the log entry just says error occurred, but it doesn't say which user suffered that error. But the best thing in terms of the logs themselves is always to gather all the application server logs. Problems can start hours before they're apparent, and they can start on one JVM and cause problems on others, particularly with performance problems. Always check the latest release notes for the related fixes. The releases that come out every 4 to 6 weeks, and they are generally very good in terms of having a lot of fixes in them, but then that does create a problem because they've got a lot of fixes in them, so they require a lot of testing. But it's always worth looking at the fix notes to see what's there. And particularly if you're raising a PMR of IBM, then the must-gather information can be very important. We had the situation with WorkRite recently, where the must-gather information dramatically sped up the fault resolution. If you're in one of those scenarios where you've got repeated problems, then it's always nice to keep a diary of those so that you can record the problems and then look for patterns. So, is a problem happening on a particular day of the week or at a particular time? And then you can go back and look at other factors. For example, are the same users on the JVM when that problem occurred? Are there other things going on, some kind of customization being executed, or users manually executing BERT reports? We've certainly seen cases of that where we've had heap dumps because of users using reports and forgetting to put where clauses on, things like that. Also, are there any other common business activities? This is particularly important if your server is a shared one and if the database is shared. I've seen and worked on several big performance problems where it was tracked back to the database and the database was shared with other systems which were very database intensive. For example, a finance system at the end of the month can be extremely busy, and that can then affect Maximo users. One of the questions that comes up regularly on our support desk is around Internet Explorer, and should your organization upgrade to the latest version. And it's important to appreciate Maximo is supported
Mark, I think we lost your audio.
It's important to realize that Maximo is supported with specific IE versions, and that will it will often work with later versions, but there can be problems. And there are known incompatibilities which are often documented in tech notes, and there can be quite a number of these tech notes, and they're not all grouped together in a way that you can easily search. So we keep a document of those tech notes, and you may need to do some searching if you're looking to introduce things like Internet Explorer 11. That's only supported at a couple of versions, so you do need to be careful. There is a tech note with a compatibility matrix in it, and that's available at on that tech note number there. You can have issues when copying from production to UAT and dev, and one of the best ways to get around that is to actually build a database script which, when you run it, resets common things. So what you do is you organize your database to be copied, and as part of that final copying process, this script is run. And it's always useful to do things like change the passwords to prevent users working in the test system by accident, set cron settings, so you've got do not run set, disable report schedules, and things like this. And also to set things, for example, a message to say welcome to UAT. That's particularly useful because it really does help ensure that a user doesn't do some production work in UAT and then say that actually they've lost that work, and before you know it, you're getting a phone call from someone senior saying, why didn't you prevent that? A one-off exercise can avoid dangers of those kind of problems. And that doesn't take a lot of work. That can be implemented within a couple of hours. If you are working with things, then raise RFEs and PMRs where possible and where relevant. And it's always worth raising a PMR for core code issues, because the official fixes will be better than the workarounds you're going to come up with. And if everyone in the community does it, then everyone's going to benefit in the long term. If you've got something that you think is an enhancement, then by all means raise an RFE for it. You never know when you're the only company wanting it. With groups like us, companies like us, we form partnerships with our customers so that we can help generate awareness of RFEs and boost the votes for them. And if you're interested in doing that and becoming, then please email me. I've presented on RFEs before and how to get the best out of it, so I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. One of the key things with RFEs and PMRs is make it easy for IBM to either say yes to an RFE or to escalate the PMR to the higher level. What can you do? Give them the information that they require. They've got some really good guys there. Okay, so we've got a quick survey now. Next slide.
Okay, so we are launching the poll now. How often do you check your logs for errors? When a problem occurs, manually and regularly, use automated tools to warn about problems, or don't check the logs. Please take a second to vote. And we're just going to wait another second or two to give you a chance to finish your voting. Okay, the poll is closed. So 72% say that they check their logs for errors whenever a problem occurs. 26% say they check them manually and regularly. 26% also say that they use the automated tools to warn about problems. And about 3% say they don't check the logs. Mark, please continue your presentation.
Thank you. That's an interesting set of results. Logs play a particularly important part in resolving problems with Maximo, getting the information that you need. And as part of that, there are some things you can do around your logs to make them easier to use for you to debug. And one of the things that I like to do with my customers is to advise them to set their log sizes to 5 files each of 10 megabytes per JVM. This can generate a lot, can use up a lot of disk space. But if you've got a very frequent or serious problem, they can generate lots of entries very quickly. And certainly if you leave the system at 5 by 1 meg, then you can find that that information, the key information, is lost very quickly. Take a few minutes to be familiar with your log entries for standard events. Startup shut. This will help you when something different occurs, because you'll be able to spot them and see what's different. Try and keep your logs clean of repeated errors, because these can hide real problems. If you're not sure about the log messages, then again, these things can be learned in a day, and I regularly teach customers and staff this, and it's really useful to get to know your logs.
because there are things in there. And as part of that, I can show you where we can change some of these things, and also if you're not regularly checking them, then it's easy to forget where they are. So in this case, yes, tells of doing a live demo. You forget the password. So for a particular JVM, you can go through and under logging and tracing, JVM logs, you can see the different settings here. So this would normally, I'd set that to 10, and that's for the system file. The system error, you don't need to have that set at 10, but it's generally easier if you're trying to explain to someone to also get them to set that by 5 by 10. And the system out will really form the area that you're going to focus on if you're looking through your logs for particular problems. And those logs will then be generated on your server in your profiles area. I've got the example here, and you can see the different things there. And if you're working on problems which could well be WebSphere related, then it is well worth looking at the FFTC folder and going in there. Those files in there contain details of serious problems that WebSphere has encountered and can contain some very useful information in there. If you're unlucky enough to be working on a system which has got memory leaks or hung threads, then it's not unusual to see things like heap dumps like these stored in the profile area for the JVMs. And I'll talk a little bit about those in a second. And similarly, the Java core files here, and that's where they would be. You need to keep an eye on these because these can use up a lot of disk space in a very busy system. If you do need to use the logs, read the logs, then my tool of preference is Notepad++. It is particularly powerful in terms of searching for entries and things like that. And that's a free download for those that are able to use free tools. So moving on, web server logs are another area that you need to just keep an eye on, really. And combined with the WebSphere logs, these can help you pinpoint communication problems. One thing to be aware of is that out of the box, the IBM HTTP server has no log file management, and this can be a real problem, because if the files aren't looked after and housekept, then it's quite possible to have a 15 gigabyte file using up a lot of disk space on your server, and that is unreadable unless you're using specialist tools to break the file up into portions that you can read. Large files can lead to high CPU and disk space usage as well. There's a nice blog posting here which references how you can implement a rotation and clean for those log files. They can include evidence of a hacking attack. I was looking at something recently where an internal security team were running a function test, and it was very useful to look through the log and to actually see that. While you're in there, don't forget to have a look at the plugin log file as well, because that can also grow. One of the things that I always try and advise new system administrators to do if they're not a developer is to learn some kind of basic knowledge of the Java language. Your log files will include Java references left, right and center. Being able to interpret a Java stack trace, for example, like this one, will speed up fault resolution, because you can look at that and identify whether or not that is related to the support case that you're working on. There's nothing more frustrating than to go through, work on resolving issues and then to come back afterwards and realize that actually that was not related to the problem that the user reported, and that the user's error message was slightly higher up in the file. And that relevant Java can be taught in a day. It's not hard to teach that one. If your database administrator's complaining about a lot of open connections, then it's worth developing an understanding about how Maximo uses database connections, because it will request and then use and release a connection. But if it doesn't actually release that connection, then it's classed as leaked. And as the connections are used more, then the leakage can grow and become a serious problem. In 7.5, there's a code called the Database Connection Watchdog, which you can use to warn of leaks, and there's a logger for that. And that generates generates log entries to warn you when that leakage occurs, and that's very useful. If you are using it, then it's worth being aware that it won't catch BERT report leaks. You have to check those manually, or in our case we use an automated checker to go through and take your BERT reports and look at them. And that can be a real problem. It certainly was a real problem with some versions of 7.5. 7.6, a lot of the reports got cleaned up when there were problems. If you're having problems with your system, then one of the things that you may want to be doing is monitoring the JVM performance. And we get a number of questions around this, and monitor performance of things like cron tasks, and SQL and things like that. And you can use tools such as Reflective Sentinel to record the times that particular tasks are taking. And it's always worth recording those times before and after releases, so that you can understand the impact of the release. While it's tempting to rely on users to tell you if it's good or bad, if the timing is good or bad, in general, in my experience, most users will only complain about timings. They won't remember when they've been better, or when they've got better. And you can use these to compare them. And they can also become the focus to improve performance. If you're suffering from heap dumps, then it is always worth monitoring the JVM's memory usage. And within the logs, we'll write out messages very similar to this one. In 7.5 it is this one, which tells you about the free memory. And what you can then do is you can extract that and come up with graphs like this. And this is something that we automatically generate from the logs we analyze. And you can see here the two JVMs. The blue one is particularly healthy. It's never less than 25% free. But have a look here. down at the red JVM, and that's under 5% in cases. And it's not unusual when you've got real problems to see the line bumping around at 1–2% before it finally hits 0 and you get a heat dump generated. And this is one of those things which is particularly important doing log analysis for heat dumps, is the problem. The JVM may have crashed here, but actually the problem started over here. So having those full sets of logs is always useful and always good. Why would you want to? Well, if the memory does become low, then the front end can become sluggish, and database locks can be held for longer than expected. If the free memory is exhausted, then you will get a heat dump generated on the application server, and users will lose work and sessions. And they may not appreciate that a heat dump has been generated on the system behind them, because to them it will just look like that session has died, and they will log in again. And in the worst case, they will log in again and they will perform the same action with the same effect. And if you're lucky, they may phone you up after the third attempt, at which point you may well be pulling your hair out. Eventually the system will become worse and the JVM will almost certainly crash once you've had a large number of heat dumps, typically after 3 or 4 instances. And the signs of that will be mainly in the logs and the file system. If you do get these heat dumps, then you need to be trying to check for them. And the best way of doing that is either through log analysis, using tools like Splunk, or through file system automated processes that look for those heat dump and Java core files. Java core files are created when heat dumps are generated. Also can be created when individual threads get stuck or have problems. And so it's always worth keeping an eye out for Java core files and then analysing them, or asking someone else to analyse them. I occasionally see advice given to people in forums around enabling verbose garbage collection on the JVM. Yes, that is an important thing to do, and IBM support may well ask you to do it. The thing with it is that if you're not actually going to analyse the results of the verbose GC, then there really isn't a lot of value in doing it, because it will just generate a lot of additional logging for a minor performance hit of 3 to 4% on the JVM. If you've got someone who's going to look at those results and process them, then by all means do so. And IBM will, and we will, and I'm sure others do. Should you invest in learning about cores and dumps and heaps and things like that? The short answer is no. It would be a wasted investment. There's other things that you can learn and provide solutions for. It requires a detailed Java analysis, and certainly in my experience, when companies are having heat dumps, then they are typically for the same reasons. And once you've solved those reasons, then those heat dumps will stop. And it can be a long time between between having to analyse them. People such as ourselves, we analyse certainly heat dumps every month, so we get a lot of practice at it. And similarly, if you're raising PMRs, then under certain circumstances you may find that IBM developers are analysing the heat dumps to have a look at what's in memory at the time. And so at that point, I'm going to stop and do some that's open up for questions. I think we're probably going to do the upgrade slides at a different time.
Thank you, Mark. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, please do so using the chat window located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we do have a starting question. That is, can using BERT reports to check data really save time and money?
Yes. Yes, quite easily. I've certainly worked in a situation where we've had problems, and as part of that you can use that BERT report to go away and perform 20 checks which you could have to execute manually as 20 pieces of SQL, cutting and pasting values left, right and centre. So yes.
Okay. Another question from John Meister. I, for one, would really like to see the upgrade-related slides for the workload separation across the JVMs. So we may need to schedule that at another time.
I can tell you, John, there is a single slide on it, and the overview of that is you should be splitting your workload across different clusters in terms of BERT and things. So if there is time, then we may be able to put that up, but I can't enter into a detailed discussion here about that.
Okay. Next question. What's the difference between the two Maximo logs, system out and error?
Okay, so system, at a technical level, these map back to different output streams within the JVM. In reality, what that means is that 90% of the messages, certainly the useful messages, will go out to the system out log file, and this is the one that the logger is primarily used to write to. And the system error is more often used for writing errors where someone has decided to write them out to the error stream. Generally, the system error will be quite an empty file, but it can have entries in there. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Thank you. The next question, are there any database maintenance tasks to take into account other than the current options available in the database configuration application?
The database maintenance things, well, you always want your DBAs to be going around looking at the system from the back end in terms of indexes, and if you've got your Maximo set up with the right thresholds, then Maximo can report slow SQL to you, so you can then use that to go and identify problems. So one of the common ones that I see comes from the database configuration application, where IBM have designed the system so that it is as easy as possible for new users to come in and find things. And this means that the attribute search types for a lot of fields are set to wildcard. And in Maximo, in SQL, that generates a like statement. Now, likes mean that indexes often can't be used, and changing that search type can really help improve performance. So looking through those slow SQL statements can really help there, and that can be a factor that helps your DBAs as well.
Okay, and it looks like potentially our last question will be, how often should I be checking my logs?
That that's always a difficult question because it depends on the number of JVMs. If you've got a lot of JVMs, then potentially you've got a lot of logs. Certainly, I like to suggest that people glance at their logs certainly several times a week to try and just pick a time, have a look through them, make sure that there's no repeated errors occurring every 2 or 3 minutes, something like that. And then particularly if you get a problem, then you do need to be going in and looking through the logs as part of your standard process to understand, are the messages that are only being written to the logs.
Okay, what automated tool are there for analyzing logs?
Well, the ones that there are several that are out there. IBM have recently come up with their own log analysis tool. One of the ones that I've seen used very effectively is called Splunk, and this is being used in this particular case is to read those log files and then to highlight and generate warnings on problems. And certainly the customers I've worked with who use Splunk have found it very useful. Internally, we've got our own log analyzer which does very similar stuff but produces much more detailed information, extract information, and highlights really serious problems and other things of concern.
Okay. Mark, if you would like to show your upgrade slides, we don't have any other questions at the moment, but we do have a few more minutes, so if you would like to show those.
Yeah, I can go through and see how far I get. So, okay, moving into the upgrades. So these are really some tips around upgrades. Support staff often have to pick up a system after it's been delivered, and that can lead to some issues. So, first tip, get involved as early as possible to help prevent problems. Automation scripts, hero or villain, well, due on that. They are very powerful, particularly at 7.6, but it is also very easy to make logic errors in there, and that can really lead to some interesting problems. Not all the error messages that are generated will be shown to the user or even logged, and that can be a real problem. If you're on version 7.5 below 0.6, then please get yourself patched up. There's some memory leaks in there which are very nasty. We were involved in getting the fixes for them. And if you're writing automation scripts, definitely put auditing on the tables so you can track the changes, because there isn't a revision control system. Separation of the work, which John was asking about, definitely use dedicated clusters for things like the BERT and MIF work. BERT can use a lot of memory, and it can exhaust memory in a JVM very quickly, particularly if it's used for normal work. And if you've got a BERT report which is doing a lot, then it can also lead to high CPU and thus sluggishness. on the system. Similarly, if you're using the MIF and particularly web services, then it's important to separate out those JVMs into their own cluster. It will make it easier to track the impact and also to debug problems around them, because you can spot when those web services are being called. There's also web services can use a lot of CPU, so you don't want those impacting and sharing CPU on the user JVMs. It can take some time to up, and it's well worth doing. One of the key things is design the cluster before you implement. Don't retrofit it after the WebSphere installation. And one of the key things is to test all user functions, particularly direct printing. Direct printing can be very difficult to resolve if there's a cluster-related problem. If you're working with a new system, then aim to patch for a fully patched system. Okay, you're going to put a system in, it could well be 2 years before you upgrade to the next version. So try and get those interim fix packs in there. Always perform all the steps. It's very tempting not to, because you don't use a particular function today. It doesn't mean that you won't use it tomorrow. Always take time to upgrade WebSphere. It's 7.1, that came with 7.00.15, and that has some really horrible memory leaks. And upgrading those can make a huge difference. The release packs, interim fix packs are every 4 to 6 weeks. Definitely worth looking at the release notes for those. 7.6 introduces quarterly feature packs. These introduce new features and fixes, but you can't just install the fixes, which some organisations may want to. And what I will do is, as people, I haven't really got time to show you the 7.6 release notes because there's other slides you're going to want to see, but go on to Fix Central and download the 7.6 fix pack and have a look at those, because they are quite nice now. Other things to watch for, while upgrading, make sure you're patched up to the level allowed for the upgrade. So in some cases, putting an interim fix pack on will prevent an upgrade because the next version of the software isn't ready to upgrade from there. So you need to be slightly careful around that. Do build a proof of concept to view the potential benefits. And this came from one of our projects where they did this and it delivered real benefits because the customer was able to see things and work through processes in their mind. If you're working with 7.6, definitely consider whether or not you want a single or multiple tenant installation. You can't change your mind afterwards. If you are doing this, definitely update that database refresh script that I mentioned earlier. And also assume that your custom code will need to be analysed and may need to be rewritten as changes between the releases. One of the big things around upgrading is testing. Make sure that the user procedures are tested, but also make sure you understand the support people. Will your support procedures work? Is anything changed? Are there any new features that you can use? Make sure you understand the messages in the logs, particularly for things like JVM stop-start, because the messages do change and things that you're looking for can change. If you've got a bubble support period, again, make sure everything works while it's there. Okay, keep backups of the key areas you're changing. Everyone remembers to do the database, but also the build folder, which with custom back files, any configuration settings like that. Document those changes when you make them so it's easy to restore them. And don't forget to test the restore process after the upgrades. In summary, there's lots of potential things that you can do to make your life easier and things to watch out for. If you have found this presentation useful, then please do fill in on the feedback and put in for that, and by all means ask for other presentations, because I can do some more in the future. And with that, any more questions, please?
Okay, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending, and a special thank you to you, Mark, for offering your time and sharing your knowledge with us. This concludes today's virtual meeting. You may now disconnect and have a wonderful day.